live at Studio B. This is your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I am Spencer Linton. He is Jerem Jordan. And because it is Monday, you know what that means. Matich Monday. Win or lose, ESPN college football insider, analyst, and national champion Trevor Matich is back on the program. Trevor, I know that it feels different than it has all season because BYU lost the game. Nonetheless, how are you after a wild college football weekend?
Well, it was a great weekend, and it was really kind of shocking to the spirit, wasn't it? I mean, BYU hadn't lost a football game in almost a full year. Like last Thanksgiving, I think was the last time they lost a game. It was just an unbroken parade of awesome for about a year, and all of a sudden things changed, you know. And so it was a great weekend overall, all over college football. BYU did some great things, but at the same time, the feeling now is different than it's been in a long, long time.
Let's talk about the Texas Tech BYU game in a second, but let's acknowledge the awesomeness that is. You are being inducted into the BYU Hall of Fame this week.
Yeah!
Congratulations, Trevor. What does that mean to you, and why did it take so long is my question to the Cougar Club. I love the Cougar Club. What took so long?
Well, listen, I'm grateful. I'm humbled. I think of people that are going to be in there in the future, and then I'm going in now, and I feel really humbled by that. And it's just an amazing thing because the crux of everything is the national championship year. And we had a great team with a lot of great players that made massive plays. I'm going to talk about some of those players in the induction ceremony, but it feels incredible. And then when you talk about what took so long, I figure that they had good reasons. You know, every year there's people that deserve to be in there that don't get in, and they're going into the future. I guess this was just my time, but I'll tell you what, I would love to talk some smack right now, but I just can't do it because I think of my teammates, and I think this is a reflection of all of them.
And it's well-deserved. It's awesome. And you've been at the forefront of what's going on with college football with ESPN, and of course we super appreciate you're the longest running guest we've had on this show since the very beginning, which has been awesome. And so it's been great. What wasn't great was BYU's performance, as you mentioned, against Texas Tech. Where did it go astray for the Cougars?
When Texas Tech took the field. That is pretty much
too soon,
what
Trevor.
Happened. Texas Tech is really good. I mean, they are good enough to win the national championship. BYU is a team that's good enough to compete to get there as well. But in order to beat a team like Texas Tech, the Cougars need to play like they've played in most of their games this year, which is to say more cleanly than their opponent plays, and losing the turnover battle 3-0, and then dropping some passes, and then shanking some punts. And these different things all added up to where they took away BYU's biggest edge, and they took away BYU's opportunity to win the game. And so really that was the difference. I mean, you can point to the offensive line. BYU didn't run the ball. The defensive front of Texas Tech was magnificent. It was hard for BYU to hear, but it was hard for any visiting team to hear. You have to figure out a way to play through that. And so I think you have to do two things to credit it. One was that Texas Tech really played the better game by far. And the second thing, or for the most part by far, the BYU defense was actually fantastic. But BYU made more of those mistakes, and then they weren't able to enforce their will at the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the ball. And that's what happened. Now, are these things that can be fixed playing against teams at the level of Texas Tech? Absolutely, because BYU is another one of those teams that's one of the best in the country. But they have to play BYU football. And on special teams and on offense, they fell short of that.
Trevor Matich is on BYU Sports Nation. We mentioned a few times some wild finishes in college football over the weekend. Penn State was nuts, but Indiana won. And then Oregon and Iowa went down to literally the last play. Oregon finds a way to win. Vanderbilt found a way to win. So, yeah, it was wild, but those teams all won. Now, I bring that up, Trevor, because BYU fans were hoping that the Cougars obviously would look competitive and maybe make it weird in Lubbock, but as you just chronicled, it didn't turn out that way. So what's the biggest issue with BYU being perceived as not competitive in that game?
Well, other than not playing cleanly on offense and on special teams, the biggest issue is not being able to find a way to transition from their bread and butter, which was the running game, into a passing attack that would be able to move the ball. I mean, the receivers dropped some passes, and I guess the Texas Tech defense, you just can't do that because it's hard to make up the yardage when you're behind the chains. The receivers needed to have made more plays. In other words, made some catches that were there to be made, but would have been difficult to break a tackle and get more yards after the catch. This is the kind of thing that BYU needs to get more of. Now, this is a really good group of receivers, and I am not pointing my finger at the BYU receivers saying, hey, they lost the game because of that. What I'm saying is that that's a place where there was opportunity for more plays to be made. It also would have helped the freshman quarterback who had 2 turnovers when in the second half he was trying to make something happen, and he, got pressured and tried to turn a bad play into a good play instead of just understanding that the bad play was bad and the defense won that play, so let's not make it worse by trying to fix it. And that's what Bear did a couple of times. But I understand that he tried to do that because they had no points at all on that first turnover. And he was trying to get something happening. That was in the third quarter. So I understand that. But you can help him a lot more. The receivers could have helped more. The offensive line could have helped more. So those are things that I think they can get better at. Keep this in mind, though, that the defense played as good a game as I've seen them play in a long, long time. They held Texas Tech to just 2 offensive touchdowns. And this is a Texas Tech team that leads the Big 12 and is 4th in the nation with 42 points per game. BYU held them not to 42, but to 29 with no help from offense and special teams. And that was, I thought, just an incredible performance. You can nitpick the defense on third downs and things like that. But to do what they did against that offense gave BYU a chance to win. The other 2 phases did not give BYU a chance to win. But from an adjustment standpoint on offense, what they'll need to do is create better pass opportunities for those times when the offensive line is not enforcing its will. And those times will happen because there are some outstanding defensive fronts out there if BYU is to play Texas Tech again, possibly in the championship game of the Big 12 and to make the playoff. They're going to face teams like this more. And they need to not just grit their teeth and say, we're just going to be tougher. Okay, that's good. That's important. But it's also something that they'll need to have plan B and plan C ready just in case. I would say this about the defense, that getting a takeaway would have been important, or a couple of them in this game with Texas Tech. Even though they held them to far below their averages in yardage and points and things like that, they didn't get any takeaways. This was a day when the offense needed a short field in order to be able to score. And if you want to nitpick the defense, that's where you would nitpick them. Although overall, they weren't the reason that BYU lost this game.
Certainly, BYU controls its own destiny. If they win the next 3, they will be in Arlington, probably against Texas Tech, who has a very manageable finish to the season with UCF and West Virginia. So, will this BYU team do what last year's did not, which is finish the deal and get to the Big 12 title game? Why or why not? And if you feel like they will, why do you feel that way?
I think that I am cautiously optimistic that they will win their last 3 games and get to the Big 12 championship game. Last year, they lost 2 late games in November and ended up one of 4 teams that finished 7-2, tied for the lead of the Big 12, and a tiebreaker sent Arizona State and Iowa State, not BYU or Colorado, I think it was, to the championship game. So right now, BYU just picked up their first loss, but in the 3 games that remain, TCU, at Cincinnati, UCF, ESPN's FPI, Football Power Index, has BYU favored in all 3 of those games, but all 3 of those games are tricky for different reasons. But BYU, if they stay relatively healthy, and if they play their best and they play BYU football, which is to say play clean, then they've got a very good chance to win out. Keep this in mind that right now there are 3 teams in the Big 12 who have 1 conference loss. BYU is one of those. There are 3 teams that have 2 conference losses. And the 3 one-loss teams are Texas Tech, BYU, Cincinnati. BYU plays Cincinnati in a couple of weeks, so that will get resolved. And so what BYU needs to do is they need to win this game, but they especially need to beat Cincinnati. because if they lose to Cincinnati, they're not going to the Big 12 championship game. If they lose to TCU, just hypothetically here, they still have a possibility to fall into a three-way tie or a four-way tie with teams with 2 losses and still have a chance at the tiebreaker. I'm not saying that TCU should be a game that they should look past. Nope. But Cincinnati is the absolute deal-breaking must-win. So when you talk about will they do what they did last year, this is what they are presented with right now. 3 games that they should win, and if they do, they will get to the Big 12 championship game.
Trevor Matich is on BYU Sports Nation. Okay, from a strictly national standpoint, Trevor, what do you feel like the perception of BYU is now with the people that matter most on the College Football Playoff Rankings Committee and where BYU will land as a result of what happened against Texas Tech?
Right now, the AP has them at number 12. And I kind of think that the committee will have them in about that spot. And I think that the perception of BYU is still as a playoff-worthy team. Now, they need to have a playoff-worthy resume, which means they need to keep winning. But I think the committee would look at BYU and they'd see their defense and say that's one of the best defenses in the country. They'll see their offense, which ran into a buzzsaw on the road. And guess what? Offenses run into buzzsaws on the road. I mean, right now, Oregon is ranked ahead of BYU. Oregon was stopped cold by Indiana on their home field in their only losses. I mean, Oregon's offense isn't good. Nope. Sometimes you have days like that. And so I think the committee will take that into account. I think for BYU fans, the important thing is this. If you take BYU at number 12 right now in the Associated Press, so let's say the committee puts them at the same spot. We'll find out later on what the committee will do. But ahead of them are Oklahoma and Texas, who have really difficult schedules going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if both of those teams lose a game going forward, which opens the door for BYU. But remember that BYU, the way things are set up now, needs to be really in the top 10, not the top 12. Because it looks like 2 conference champions, one from the ACC, one from the group of 5, that are right now ranked by the committee and the AP behind BYU, would have to jump number 11 and then number 12, and that will displace those 2. So if you're a BYU fan and if the committee comes out and puts BYU at number 12, don't be comfortable that BYU would then be in the playoff if the season ended today. Nope. They would not be in the playoff. There's still more work to do. They've got to get up into that top 10 to be able to take a breath.
Trevor, once again, always great to have you on the show, and congratulations on being inducted into the BYU Athletic Hall of Fame.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.